Oh, well, mine, I thought
Hi.
mine was set strong.
Oh, it's nice to see everybody. I'm Jane DeSelm, and I'm David's wife, and I'm a docent here for
Mhm.
10 years. And I want you to know that David is an architect and urban planner and has a long career in that field and has done a lot of work overseas in Arab countries, among many other
It's not
places.
showing up on the
So
screen
he's
either.
quite well versed in
Oh, okay.
this type of architecture
It's got a
that's
whole.
not not native to what we to the Chumash Indians. Let's put it that way. And I can attest to the fact that he spends a lot of time working on his presentations to make sure that they're accurate and interesting for you. And if you have any questions at all, he can give you an answer like you would not believe.
I'm
Okay.
good at making them up.
Yeah. So without further ado, I turn it over to you, David.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. I'm not a docent here, but I feel like I'm really connected with the docents because of all the things that Jane has done as a docent here for all of these years, and that so many of us are all doing all different kinds of things around the community, and we bump into each other in all of our other activities as well. So it's great to see everybody, and it's always a pleasure to be back here with Courthouse docents. And uh, about a year ago, I think a couple of years ago, I came through with some friends from out of town, and we were just going to do a little walk around through the courthouse. And somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, David, how are you doing?" And I'm thinking, "Wow, who remembers me?" But from the docents. But anyway, it was really fun, and it's always been great to be here. Now, this talk goes back way back to a training program in 2016. So that's like 9 years ago. And I think that Debbie Bruce was running that training program at the time. So I owe her a lot because that's what really inspired this particular program. And it's been updated a few times since then. And I've given it to a lot of other people, including some docent training programs under Denise Parker. But I owe a lot of people a lot of credit for contributing to all of this, whether they realize it or not. I cribbed a lot of their information and knowledge, including Robert Uli, of course, who knows everything about the courthouse, and Rodney Baker, who will always talk about the courthouse, and all the information I got from Peggy Hayes and all the things that she saved and squirreled away behind um, uh, the visitor's place. And also to Sheila Lodge, who gave me an advanced copy of her personal memoirs before it was published with really good information in it. And Ken Hyman, who I think a lot of you know, who gave me a lot of really critical information on why things happened the way they did. And Sue Miller, who got me involved also, along with my wife, with the docents, who I've known for a long time, and who tried to do the very first recording of this program. So all of those people have really contributed, and I hear comments from you all the time. So that's always really nice too. So with all of that, let's just get started. Hopefully I can, I'm still trying to navigate this thing a little bit. Um, so uh, our one-of-a-kind courthouse, how did it get its design? You may recognize a lot of this stuff that's in here. I got to be two-fisted here to do things. Yeah, let's see. Is this working? How do I get this to work? Over there. Okay. Is that doing it? No. Oh, okay. I'll just tell you to do that. I'm going to go real fast through here. So we all know the Santa Barbara Courthouse is a beautiful building. It's one of the most distinctive courthouse structures in America. It's a landmark symbol of Spanish heritage of Santa Barbara. And it was designed by architects who did not win the design competition for the building. So, our beautiful courthouse, how did it get its design? During this discussion, we are going to explore the following questions. Why was the courthouse designed in the image of southern Spain, and how did the architects achieve their design? So part one, how did the community leaders of Santa Barbara decide that the courthouse should be designed in the architectural style of southern Spain? Well, it all began in 1919 with a design competition to replace the courthouse facilities dating back to 1875. Anybody been in this building? No. Okay. Well, good. Good. That's good. The design competition was based on four important design criteria. Meet the space requirements for county services, which makes a lot of sense. Make the new facilities easily expandable, another really good idea. Make the new design cost effective, something really important, especially to the Board of Supervisors, and reflect the Spanish heritage of Santa Barbara. Well, the previous courthouse didn't do that, so why did they decide to do that? At the time, most courthouses all over the United States were being built in the Victorian classical revival style. And you can see there's the Santa Barbara Courthouse from 1875 in the middle. And there's a lot of them around the state of California, but there's a couple like Fresno and Placer County there. And then there's one for a little town in Illinois called Kankakee. Not a very big town. It's in a rural area. That's where I grew up. That was my hometown. And we had one of those classical revival courthouses there too. And it was the most important building in the town. So they were all over the country. Okay, next slide. As we all know, Santa Barbara began, though, as a Spanish colonial settlement, and it really had this identity for itself. So the Presidio, the Mission, early adobe buildings, most of them are still around today. Uh, but then, like other towns in California, especially after the gold rush, Santa Barbara started to evolve into a typical 19th century Victorian style community. And there are a lot of Victorian style buildings around here still today. And it was the primary identity of the city for about 50 years. The Arlington Hotel was a famous building. Even downtown State Street up until the earthquake was primarily Victorian in style. And there's still a lot of really great Victorian buildings all around Santa Barbara today. Okay. Then in the early 20th century, interest in regional identities all over the US led to the creation of mission revival style of architecture in California. So back east, everybody was looking at American colonial style because that was what everybody was building originally. In New Orleans, they were looking at French colonial style, but in California and Texas and Florida and all the places where the Spanish colonized in North America, they were looking essentially at the missions for vision. So in Santa Barbara, about that time, the city leaders said, well, let's do that too. And one of the very first examples, go back a second, to that is the Potter Hotel. And let's see if I can get this to shine up there. There we go. Okay, so the Potter Hotel, if you look at, well, maybe not. So somehow I think the screen is overwhelming this light. So yeah, it only stays on for a second, unfortunately. Well, I'll just verbalize this. So you can see the two twin towers on the Mission. The Potter Hotel, which was the most famous hotel in Santa Barbara at that time, sort of picked up on that idea of the two Mission towers. And then you look in between the two towers on the Mission, you can see that triangular roof. And the Potter Hotel had a triangular roof. And then if you look straight down, you can see where the entrance walkway goes into the Potter Hotel. There's a veranda, but there's also a small arch, and that's just like the entrance to the Mission. Then if you look over to the right, you'll see another veranda, and just above the roof of that veranda, you'll see an arcade. And so that picks up on the arcade of the Mission. So all those little things were being adopted and used for modern buildings back in the early 20th century. Then the Potter Hotel, because it was so popular, had a lot of people coming in from all over the place by train. So they had to build a bigger train station. So 3 years later, the train station was built, and they used the arcade from the Mission to create the arcade at the train station, which is why that's there. So that was a really popular style, but only lasted a few years. Uh, at that same time, the community leaders in Santa Barbara, a lot of wealthy people, a lot of influential people, uh, really were beginning to get interested in using the Spanish heritage of Santa Barbara and the wonderful climate of Santa Barbara to promote Santa Barbara as a tourism destination and a luxury home location to compete with San Diego and the Bay Area up around San Francisco. And they wanted to attract all the wealthy people who were building country homes who were coming from the industrialized cities back east, coming out to California for the climate. They wanted to attract them here. And that was really the impetus that got things to start to change the city of Santa Barbara. Okay. Then in 1915, there was a big exposition in Panama and in San Diego called the Panama California International Exposition. And it was held to celebrate the opening of the Panama Canal. And at that time, uh, Spanish Baroque architecture was really popular in California, especially in San Diego, but also, and they were looking at places like Mexico City and Lima, Peru, where the most important buildings in those cities were this very, very elaborate style of architecture, which was popular around 1900 and a little later. And it was great for a big exposition, but maybe not so good for regular buildings. Keep this in mind. But Santa Barbara already had a Spanish self-image. From its very beginning, Santa Barbara has celebrated holidays and special events with Spanish musicians and dancers and writers, and they're still doing it today, 100 years later. That's the most important thing in Fiesta and a lot of the parades. Then, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, something else happened in the world. Concern over problems in rapidly industrializing cities in both Europe and the United States uh, uh, led to a movement called the City Beautiful Movement, an international movement of design. And it was created and spearheaded by the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. The École des Beaux-Arts was the most famous art school, art and architecture school in the world in the early 20th century. And people from all over the world wanted to go there and study. And it was not only art and architecture, but literature and music and all kinds of things. It was the most famous school in the world. And some people from the United States were able to go there. And we'll talk about that as it goes along. But it had this theory of teaching that if you looked at historical art and architecture or literature or music or anything, and you studied it really, really well, and you got really good at understanding the historical part of those artistries, that you could take what you learned and you could apply it to new contemporary architecture at that time. So that led to a whole idea called the City Beautiful movement. Oh, wait a second, let's go back again. So on the other picture on the left, I led to a thing called the City Beautiful movement. And that was the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, which celebrated the opening of the discovery of America by Columbus 500 years and 1 year earlier. The fair came online a year too late, but it was a really popular fair. Everybody went to it. It was designed in the colonial or the Victorian style of that time. But because all the cities that were industrial were all dirty and polluted and everything, they painted this whole project white, and it was really sparkling. It was really beautiful, and everybody loved it. And they said, "This is what we got to do with our cities. We've got to figure out a way to beautify our cities." So, okay, next slide. So, in 1909, a few years later, the Civic League of Santa Barbara, which was a leading citizens organization here, hired a city beautiful design expert from the University of Illinois named Charles Robinson. And of course, he would have been involved in the City Beautiful movement and the exposition in Chicago. And so he was an expert at all of this. And they invited him to come to Santa Barbara and look at State Street and say, how can we make State Street look a lot better? Because it was just all of these older Victorian style buildings. And the city leaders really wanted to try and attract tourism and investment here. Okay. So Robinson made a number of recommendations, but 4 of them were really important. And the first one was save the waterfront. Don't let anybody build anything tacky or anything that obstructs the beach. And so they got the city leaders to actually buy up all the property on the waterfront on West Beach And that's why we have that beach there today. Otherwise, there'd be piers and there'd be recreation centers and there'd be fishing things and all kinds of stuff that we wouldn't have. So this was really valuable. The second is treat the mission and the Casa de la Guerra as historic landmarks and use them to create a new identity for Santa Barbara. The third was create a civic center plaza right in front of the Casa de la Guerra and use that historic building as the centerpiece for downtown. And the fourth one was unify the visual image of Santa Barbara all along State Street, all the way from the ocean or the beach, all the way up as far up State Street as you can go, maybe all the way to the mission. Well, Pearl Chase got interested in the City Beautiful movement, and after she graduated from Berkeley in 1909, she became a strong advocate for beautifying Santa Barbara. Okay. And using her social influence, she pushed the community leaders to plant trees and save historic buildings. So Anapamu Street's one of the famous streets. You know, all the gigantic trees that are there, they were all planted by her, and a lot of other streets are also planted by there. And that's why we have so many trees in Santa Barbara. There were none here when it was originally founded by the Spanish. And then the Lugo adobe is one of the best preserved adobes, and there's a number of them around, but that's right there in the artist studios next to the Santa Barbara Historic Museum. Then in 1913, an investment banker came from San Francisco to retire. His name was George Batchelder. I think you all know about him. Uh, well, he didn't retire. He got involved in development and he decided to build a residential project in the foothills above Santa Barbara Mission that would look like a Mediterranean village because he knew that would be good marketing. And he called it the Riviera. And that's how the Riviera got started. Now it's one of the most spectacular places that anybody wants to live in the city. Okay. So then in 1917, an artist named George Washington Smith, you've all heard of him, came to town. He had studied art in Europe and he had visited southern Spain. He did like a lot of people do. He'd go to Europe to go to university, and then he'd take advantage of the fact that he was in Europe, travel all over looking at all the sites. I did that when I was in architecture school. Um, so he became really interested in southern Spain. And when he came to Santa Barbara, he originally came as an artist. I think a lot of you know that. But then he designed himself a Spanish Andalusian style home in Montecito. He had actually made a lot of money off the stock market or the bond market, so he could afford to do that. And it became a studio, and then it became an example of what he could do. And a lot of other wealthy people in Santa Barbara said, okay, could you design a house like that for me? And so George Washington Smith, as we all know, became very prolific, and he designed about 80 buildings in Santa Barbara over a period of 10 years. Again, about that same time, Santa Barbara began to attract a lot more influential people. In 1919, an engineer named Bernard Hoffman and his wife Irene moved to Santa Barbara from Massachusetts. I think you all know him too. They loved the Spanish heritage of Santa Barbara. That same year, prominent business leaders in Santa Barbara formed a group called La Primavera Association to create a Spanish-style spring festival that they could use to attract tourism. Well, that was the beginning of Fiesta. So La Primavera evolved into Fiesta, and Fiesta moved to the summertime, to August, and the citizens group became the Community Arts Association, and I think you know all about them. And Pearl Chase and Bernard Hoffman were very influential members of that group, and they started to lead the city. Okay. In 1920, a Scottish architect named James Osborne Craig, I think many of you know him too, designed a home in Montecito to look like an Andalusian farmhouse from southern Spain. He had learned Spanish colonial design working on the restoration of Mission Santa Ynez. Now, I don't know much about his provenance or how he got here from Scotland, but that was really how he got started working on the Santa Ynez mission. But Mrs. Hoffman found him and she said, I want you to design me a house for my husband and me in this Spanish style. I really love it. And they had owned a Victorian style house up on Mission Creek, and they got James Osborne Craig to convert it to an Andalusian style. And this is called Casa Santa Cruz. You can't see it, but that's what it looks like. In 1922, Pearl Chase and Bernard Hoffman collaborated to create a plans and planting committee inside the Community Arts Association to encourage city beautification. And that meant not only saving the beach and saving all many of the historic adobe buildings like this one, which is at the Historical Museum, uh, but everything that they could find that was historic, they started that whole movement. Okay. Through the Plans and Planting Committee, which became really powerful, Chase and Hoffman and Batchelder began promoting the vision of a picturesque Spanish identity for Santa Barbara. They were all looking for that idea to develop Santa Barbara, to create a business opportunity, a tourism opportunity, and a development opportunity here. At the same time, the Hoffmans actually became friends with descendants of the De La Guerra family. And I think Mrs. Hoffman actually took Spanish lessons from one of the De La Guerra grandchildren. Uh, and they spent a lot of time there, but the casa was really run down. So eventually, Bernard Hoffman convinced them to sell them the casa to them, and they uh, bought it and they restored it using James Osborne Craig as the architect. Now, it didn't quite look like this. This is a modern restoration, a more recent restoration, but it was a big way of saving the the most historic building in the city. Then Bernard Hoffman asked James Osborne Craig to design an Andalusian-style village center right next to the Casa de la Guerra. And as you know, it really touches the back of the casa, so it's really the backyard. Well, I'm sure that when Hoffman bought the Casa de la Guerra, he got property with it. He got land, and so he took advantage of the backyard to create this mixed-use village center. And it's one of the very first mixed-use retail complexes in the entire United States that was owned by one developer. So it's a really pioneering project. It was a really popular project, and all of you who have lived in Santa Barbara a long time know how popular this place was up until the Paseo Nuevo was built, and all the business leaders, all the city leaders would go here for lunch and meetings and parties in the evening. It was just one of the most popular places in town for a long time. I had an office there for a while. I could see people coming in and out all the time. Um, so this became the model, really, by the citizens of Santa Barbara for the new Andalusian identity goal that they were after. Okay. Then Hoffman picked up on that idea and he formed a Citizens Architectural Advisory Committee to promote an Andalusian design for a new civic center in the Plaza de la Guerra, which was essentially the front yard of the Casa de la Guerra. And although he didn't own that, by that time, it was occupied by the city town hall, and it was in a Victorian building that was a brick building. And he convinced the city, who was thinking about renovating or rebuilding the town hall in the same location in the middle of the Plaza de la Guerra, to move it over to the side of the Plaza de la Guerra so they could have a real plaza. Then he talked the editor of the Santa Barbara News Press at that time to building their headquarters on the other side of the Plaza de la Guerra, with the idea they would have two important buildings plus the casa itself. So that's three buildings that would frame the plaza. And that way they would create a city center like the City Beautiful person had suggested that this would be the most important place downtown. Well, unfortunately, that vision for the Plaza de la Guerra as an Andalusian civic center never really materialized. We all know it's just an empty lot now with parking for a few people and maybe use once or twice a year for a festival. And that's about it. It's been 100 years and nothing has really ever happened with that. And there's a current movement by the city of Santa Barbara to do something with it, but it's kind of stalled as well. There's been several designs to landscape it, but the real problem is that it's not connected to State Street. And if you go to any reasonable sized town and even big cities in Spain, you will see that the most important place is the center of the city. It's the plaza. It's where the government buildings are. It's where the church is. That's where everybody goes. And here we're kind of missing the boat because it's just an empty lot. So I'm hoping that they will be able to do something about that someday. And I know the city is trying. Okay, one last thing then. In 1923, George Washington Smith was asked to create, among one of the many other things that he did around town, a unified Andalusian design concept to change the identity of State Street from Victorian style to the new Andalusian style that the city leaders were trying to promote because they wanted to change the identity of Santa Barbara. It's really amazing that Santa Barbara was able to actually change its identity. No other city has ever really been able to do that. It would evolve, but they deliberately changed it. And the goal was to uh, create a picturesque Andalusian village style like the villages were in Andalusia, and to make it a really attractive place for people to come as a tourist and people to come and live here. And all of that really succeeded. And all of these things happened before the earthquake hit in 1925. So the city was actually in a fantastic position to be able to take advantage of the earthquake. All right, now normally I would kind of stop here and ask for questions, but we're kind of limited on time, so I'm going to just keep going. So go to the next part. So now we're going to talk about, well, how did they actually design the courthouse, given all of these things that led up to the idea of changing the identity of Santa Barbara to a Spanish village style. So after the big earthquake in 1925, how did the design for a new courthouse go from this, the Victorian style on the left, to this, the style that we have now that really establishes the Spanish identity of Santa Barbara? Well, community leaders immediately recognized that the major earthquake damage to the downtown was not only a big problem, how are they going to rebuild, but it was also a fantastic opportunity to rebuild the courthouse in downtown Santa Barbara in their new Andalusian vision for the city. So back in 1919, which was before the earthquake, uh, there was a design competition to come up with a new design for the courthouse because the courthouse had been constantly growing and growing and gone through 4 or 5 iterations from an original adobe building to the 1875 Victorian style building. And this was right after the San Diego Exposition. So a number of the designs that were brought into the design competition were influenced by the elaborate Spanish Baroque style of the San Diego Exposition. But for the Board of Supervisors, that was way too expensive, and they didn't want to do something that elaborate. They needed something practical. Um, so there were uh, these two design competitions. Top two ones were done by Edgar Matthews from San Francisco and the architectural team of William Mosier and Horace Simpson, also from San Francisco, and they operated as a team. And that is how William Mosier got involved. On June 29th, just 4 days after the big earthquake ruined the courthouse, the Santa Barbara Board of Supervisors selected William Mosier to design a new courthouse. So why did they pick William Mosier? He came in second, not first. Well, Mosier did not win the design competition, but the firm was picked in 1925 because it had practical courthouse design experience. And in fact, they had done quite a few courthouse designs all over the state of California. And so they really knew how to do it. And so the Board of Supervisors was confident that they could get a good building out of it and they could get some of the things that they wanted, including inexpensive design or at least economical design and a building that had all the state of the art that they wanted at that particular time. So meanwhile, in response to the earthquake, a board of public safety and reconstruction was created to manage the rebuilding effort. And that was because people had seen what had happened in San Francisco in 05. And that reconstruction was just chaotic and crazy and out of control. And the city leaders here wanted to control it not only because they needed to have it under control, but they wanted to change the identity of the city. Then there was a Board of Architectural Review that was given authority to approve all reconstruction projects. So this was a way that they could not only manage the quality, but they could manage the design character of the reconstruction downtown. And the Board of Architectural Review included Bernard Hoffman and George Washington Smith, both of whom were experts and enthusiasts for Andalusian design. So guess what they're going to be pushing? In addition, a community drafting room was created by the Community Arts Association to offer free architectural design for any reconstruction using the new Andalusian style. They would just design, if you're your store on State Street was destroyed, well, they'll give you an Andalusian design for a new store. So that was a fantastic way of motivating ordinary people to get on the bandwagon and design things according to the new Andalusian concept. Well, at the same time, there's a lot of things going on. Many government and community groups got involved in the new courthouse design process, including the Board of Supervisors, because they were the clients and the users, the Planning Commission, because they needed to control everything that was being built in the city, the Plans and Planning Committee, because that was the driving force of the leading citizens, the Architectural Advisory Committee, because Bernard Hoffman had set that up to promote the idea of the Spanish-style plaza in front of the Casa de la Guerra, the Board of Public Safety and Rehabilitation to make sure they got a good building, and the Board of Architectural Review, again, so they could control the architecture. And of course, they didn't all agree with each other because the courthouse people, the Board of Supervisors wanted something that was very practical, but the leaders of the community wanted to change the character of the whole city and use the courthouse as the landmark building for that. So that's what I just said. So there was much discussion about how to design the new courthouse, and the primary concern was function versus identity. The Board of Supervisors wanted function and efficiency, and the Board of Architectural Review wanted identity and character, and these two things didn't always line up. And they debated for months and months and looked at a lot of different options, and they could not come up to a conclusion that satisfied everybody. So then they created a board of arbitration to finally try and resolve these issues. And the chief negotiator, which was the chairman of the board, was George Batchelder. And George Batchelder had built the Riviera. So guess what he was going to be pushing? Well, at some point, and I don't know what happened here, at some point, someone suggested designing the courthouse like a Spanish castle. I don't know why, but there is a book that's interesting. Get it here. Right here. I don't know if you've seen this book or not. It's called Material Dreams, and it was written by Kevin Starr, and it talks about Los Angeles and Southern California in the early 20th century. And there's 2 chapters in here on how Santa Barbara transformed itself from the previous Victorian city into what it is today. So I got a lot of information from this book. Okay, so why did they go for a Spanish castle? Well, maybe one of the ideas was they wanted to have it look like a Spanish seat of power. That's what the courthouse was, a Spanish seat of power. So there were 3 historic seats of power in Spain. There were the Moorish palaces, because the Moors occupied southern Spain for 700 years. So the Alhambra is the premier example of that. There's a number of others, obviously, that are really, really good as well. Then there were Christian churches. So in 1492, when the Christians managed to completely reconquer Spain from the Moors, then they started building churches, actually right on top of mosques, like the cathedral at Seville. It's actually inside a mosque. And several others are like that too. The one in Cordoba is the same way. And the church was in charge of everything in those days, back in the 1400s, when the Christians got the country back. But also, there were a lot of castles in Spain, because the Christians in northern Spain had built castles to keep the Moors from invading farther north into Europe. And so they fortified northern Spain, and there were a lot of castles in northern Spain. So those are all centers of power. Okay, next. But maybe there was another reason, and that was maybe Santa Barbara's namesake was the inspiration for a castle design. I think you all know the story about St. Barbara and how she became a saint. Legend says that she was locked in a tower by her Roman father in the 3rd century AD while he was traveling. He wanted to keep her safe, but somehow somebody got in and converted her to Christianity. And when he got back, he found out about it. And according to Roman law, that person who was converted had to be martyred, had to be sacrificed. And he killed his own daughter. He wouldn't let anybody else touch her. So the tower became the symbol for St. Barbara. And since the St. Barbara was named after St. Barbara's festival day, the city of Santa Barbara has adopted the castle as one of its symbols. And so you see it on the Santa Barbara flag, which is there. So Mosher was asked to redesign the new courthouse to look like a Spanish castle. Well, this is one of my favorite castles in northern Spain, at the Alcazar of Segovia. It really looks like a castle. Okay, so why are there castles in Spain? Well, I just sort of mentioned it, but the Arab conquest, which started in the Middle East and Arabia at Mecca and Medina in the 7th century AD, eventually spread all the way east to India and all the way west to Morocco and up into Spain. And the Muslims actually initially captured almost all of Spain, all the way up to the Pyrenees Mountains, with a few exceptions. But they were pushed back towards southern Spain by the Christian armies from northern Europe. And they settled down and they created an Islamic government in most of southern Spain called the Caliphate of Cordoba. So you all know what caliphates are. We see them today as well. And to block any further advance of the Muslims back up north again, the Christians in northern Spain built a whole chain of fortified castles. And all those castles had their fortifications, including towers. Meanwhile, the Muslims settled down in southern Spain and they built towns and they built palaces and they built gardens. And they had a much better lifestyle living in southern Spain with their beautiful towns and palaces and gardens than the Christians did up north in their fortified castles. Now, over the years, new waves of Muslims called Moors came in from North Africa, and that whole area in red in North Africa uh, was originally a Roman province. And people who came from that area and went into southern Spain, even though they were actually Muslims, they were all called Moors because that Roman province was originally called Mauritania. So it's kind of like saying, well, if you come from Mauritania, you must be a Moor, just like we say, if you come from Latin America, you must be a Latino, regardless of all the differences of where you might have come from. And the Moors brought with them all of their artistry and all of their skills and all of their culture from North Africa and the Middle East and settled down and lived in southern Spain for 700 years. So that's how Spain looks like it does. And if you go to Spain, you'll see a big difference between northern Spain and southern Spain. Okay, well, eventually, after 700 years, things started to fall apart, and the Caliphate of Cordoba fell into a whole bunch of regional kingdoms called taifas. And you can see there's a whole bunch of them there. And each one of those things then had to have its own ruler. It's kind of like what's happening in the Middle East today. There's all kinds of now areas where everybody, in Africa as well, where they're all trying to assert their own uh, command of their area. So each one of those had a kingdom, and each one of them had a leader, and each one of those leaders built his own castle. So at first, uh, there were castles in northern Spain to defend against southern Spain, and then there were castles in southern Spain because everybody had to have their castle to control their territory. Well, back in Santa Barbara, there were many meetings and still no agreement on the courthouse design. And they argued for 3 months, which was an eternity for the Board of Supervisors. They wanted to get started right away. They needed their facilities back as soon as they could. So at one point, after about 3 months, George Batchelder, who was the chief negotiator for the Board of Arbitration, said, well, why don't we give the community drafting room a try? They've been designing dozens of buildings in downtown Santa Barbara, particularly along State Street, and they're building them already, and we haven't even got a design yet. So they said, well, the Board of Supervisors wasn't sure about that because they were specializing in Andalusian design and they weren't sure that would work for a courthouse. But they said, okay, we'll give them one day to come up with a design and then we'll see. So they put J. Wilmer Hershey, who was a designer in the community drafting room, to work. And he talked with a number of community leaders about what they wanted. And he had good experience, and everybody was confident that he would come up with a design. He had previously worked for another famous architect named Wallace Neff. I don't know if you know him, you might be aware of him. He was actually the George Washington Smith of Pasadena, and he had been building buildings all over northern the suburbs of LA, just like George Washington Smith was designing Andalusian style buildings. Wallace Neff had actually been an apprentice to George Washington Smith for a short period of time, and they knew each other, and I'm sure they collaborated on a lot of things. Well, J. Wilmer Hershey had learned Andalusian design from Wallace Neff, and he was really good at it. So Jay Wilmer was briefed on all the issues, all the programs, all the things that the Board of Supervisors wanted, and all the things that the leading citizens wanted to have in a new courthouse. And he sat down and he worked all night long. And this is what he came up with. Using the idea of a Spanish castle with walls that surround an interior open space or courtyard, he solved the problem of making the courthouse easily expandable, which is one of the key things that the Board of Supervisors want. They didn't want to build a building and then have to build more buildings later on. And he designed it in a way where the building would wrap around the courthouse site rather than sit in the middle. So when you look at the courthouse design, I don't know if I can do this again here. Here's the courthouse, was the previous courthouse, the 1875 courthouse. This is what he designed to do all the way around like that. This would be the outer walls of the castle. And that created a big, large open space in the middle, which could be a community park or gathering place. And he designed it so that it could be built in stages, which the Board of Supervisors loved. And so the first stage was this area right here where the courtroom wing is, and there's 4 courtrooms there, as you know. And then this wing was built probably at the same time, I'm not sure. And this is where the mural room is, and this is where a lot of the office space was originally. And then you could add increments to it. So then they added this increment here, which is more office space at the time. And then they added this increment here, which became the Hall of Records. Then they added this increment over here, which became the jail, as we all know. But this gave them tremendous flexibility. And then they had all this space left over that they could do additions. Well, they never did the additions for a number of reasons, but one of them was that some people thought were so liked the center of the courtyard so much, they wanted to leave it open to the community, which was a good idea. But what this did was this arrangement created a large interior public open space that could be a garden, like the inside of a Moorish palace, or it could be, like I said, the public open space. Let's go back one for a second. I want to show something. Yeah. Now, a lot of people think that this sunken garden and the rock walls for the sunken garden was the foundation of the previous courthouse. But if you go back one more slide, this was the foundation. This was the foundation of the courthouse. So it's nothing like that. It was absolutely designed to be an outdoor auditorium and community activity place. So they could take the entrances. This is the Great Arch, and they could take this and turn it into a stage, which is what they do. And this would be then the lower sunken garden could be the orchestra level of the auditorium. And then this upper level garden here and over here could be the mezzanine. So you could have different levels, just like an auditorium. And then they also had the option of putting the stage over here, which happens a lot. And then this could be all the stage area, or that could be the special place where people can sit on stage, the real VIPs. And all the rest of this, again, is the orchestra level and the mezzanine level. It was a really, really clever design. It was meant to be that way all along. Okay, let's go ahead. So this became the real public event place, and that's how we use it now, as a public event place. Okay, next slide. But there was one other issue with that, and also saved the Board of Supervisors a lot of money. So they were willing, they didn't have to build a building or a big room or a big addition to have an auditorium. They got all of this. It's just landscaping. But there was another problem about trying to save money. If they followed the castle idea, they would have to build the exterior walls out of stone. And the stone walls are going to cost a lot, and the Board of Supervisors was really uptight about how much money they were going to have to spend, and it cost a lot of money at the end anyway. They wanted to save money, so somebody came up with the idea, and I don't know who it was. It could have been Mosher, but it could have been Jay Wilmer. Let's design the walls of the courthouse to look like a town square in a Spanish town. And let's use stucco, because this is what town squares look like. And it'll do the same thing, and it'll feel just like a Spanish village. So if you go to the next slide, it'll look like this, and it'll fit right into the scale of the town, and it won't be this domineering forbidding building that you don't want to go to because you're going to a jury for either one side of the jury or the other side of the jury. Um, but this created a scale that was just perfect to be part of the city and to create the identity of the city at the size of the city that people would be comfortable with. Well, it's hard to know what ideas may have been Jay Wilmer's and what he might have responded to from other people, including all of these people who, in one way or another, were involved in all the early discussions about how do you recreate Santa Barbara after the earthquake and how do you use the courthouse as the way to inspire all of that. So Bernard Hoffman, we talked about him, and Pearl Chase and George Batchelder, James Osborne Craig, George Washington Smith, J. Wilmer Hershey, Luda Riggs was involved, Reginald Jackson, Carlton Winslow. There was a whole bunch of other people and a bunch of designers in the community drafting room. And it's also hard to really know what ideas might have come later based on Jay Wilmer's efforts that were adopted by Mosher when he got involved because he liked these ideas. Well, everybody liked Jay Wilmer's new concept. Even the Board of Supervisors was willing to say, they've got a good idea here. Let's go for it. However, obviously, he did not do a complete design in one night. He came up with a concept for it. And then it was up to the Mosher firm, which was in charge of actually doing the architectural design, to take this concept and faithfully develop it into a new design. Well, the Mosher firm, as you all know, you know a lot about this, was founded by William Mosher in San Francisco in 1851. At the time of the courthouse design in 1925, William Mosher II was leading the firm. He was very good with clients. He was also very flexible. So he was willing to try new ideas. Also, his son had gone to architecture school and he had attended the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And this is the most prestigious architecture school in the world at the time, and it focused on historic design. And so he made his son the project architect for the courthouse. The project architect is the guy who's in charge of the design and in charge of getting that design built the way it was designed. Um, and so he had also, and on top of that, he had also spent some time after he studied at the École des Beaux-Arts and learned the importance of historic design. He actually worked in Spain, so he was really familiar with Spain. So from all of those studies at the École des Beaux-Arts, he understood the value of looking at historic precedents, and he went back to Spain to look for ideas. And in Spain, he would have looked at four key things: castles, palaces, churches, and towns. Those are the main examples of what you would do for a city center like a courthouse. And ideas that he might have found in Spain are really interesting. So square towers is the first thing that comes to mind when you look at the uh, bell tower here at our courthouse, and you look at these three churches in Spain. They all have the same shape. They all have I mean the clock tower. They all have a belfry at the top with a couple of arches. Then they have some the tower square, and it's divided into segments by those little horizontal strips, and the courthouse tower does all of that, and it's right adjacent to a main entrance. So you can see all of that. He also would have looked at round towers because round towers are part of castle designs. And so the rotunda at the courthouse that comes directly from the designs of round towers from castles in Spain. And they use that shape. Let's go back for a second. They use, yeah, it's okay. They use that shape in castles where the top level extends out over it so that it's really difficult for somebody who's attacking the castle to climb up and get over that extended rim. And also it gives the defenders of the castle the chance to shoot down through openings in the top between those buttresses or drop boiling oil on top of attack, because you all know that stuff. And in the courthouse, of course, that gives windows up there. Then the next thing they did, he adopted was a monumental entry arch. Now he'd studied at the École des Beaux-Arts. He was studying ancient architecture. He knew Rome really well. And so he picked up on the idea of the Arch of Titus in Rome. And the Arch of Titus has this great big arch that's highly decorated with columns on both sides and a frieze on top of that. Well, if you look at the great arch at the courthouse, it looks really like he took that picture and just designed it from that picture with the big arched opening, the two columns, the frieze on top of that. But then you look down at the one on the lower left, Carmona. Carmona was a Roman city that was built in northern Spain in the times when Rome occupied Spain as part of the Roman Empire. So this was a Roman entrance design to a historic city, and it does the same thing. It's got a big arched opening. It's got columns on both sides. Got a frieze on top. Then it's got a sort of another sort of I don't know what you call that, but a sort of monumental element. On top of that, it's got a little window in it. Well, if you look up at the courthouse, it's got all those same things, plus the little window, plus the triangular roof on top of all of that. And they're all different. He didn't copy things, but he took the idea and said, I'm going to follow that idea because it's a historic idea. Then if you look at the one on the courthouse on the lower right, this is a convent in northern Spain. And this was a church building. But look at how similar that is to the courthouse. You got a great big entrance arch. You've got columns on both sides. You got a frieze above it. You got a window above that. You got a triangular roof above that. You've got a tower right next to it with a small entrance door right next to at the bottom of that, just like the courthouse has. And then you got a belfry up on top. And then you've got a series of windows and two stories that go off to the left on that building. And so does the courthouse. It does the same thing. It's just amazing how William Mosher was able to use his Beaux-Arts skills by just lifting ideas from historic precedents and using it to create the casa or the courthouse. And he did that in such a creative way that it's really original, but he used all these existing idioms to create that design. Okay, go to the next one. This goes on. There's more and more things that he adopted. This is really just super high Beaux-Arts design. So he also adopted, because they wanted to save money, the white stucco walls from a town hall. And this is a town hall called the Parador Merida on the upper left. And it doesn't have everything lined up in an artificial, arbitrary, high artistry type of thing like a lot of Victorian courthouses look like, where everything was organized with windows just like this and all the things all lined up in a row. It followed the functional use of those buildings. And so this administrative building, this is a town hall actually in Merida. You can see there's an entrance, but the doors and windows are all different sizes and they're placed where they need to be functionally. So he also, Mosher also picked up on that idea. And then if you look on the lower left, Grazalama is a village town that's very condensed and very urban. But look at all the variety in the doors and windows there. They are not organized in some artificial architectural way. They are organized for their function. But it's really interesting. And that's why we all like southern Spain. It's so cute because all of this stuff has all these interesting things that are different. Well, the courthouse on the right-hand side did the same thing purposely. There's a variety of things all in one facade. Window with bars and shutters and a balcony and other kind of sizes of windows that all fit kind of what was going on behind. Okay, the next one. Then there's more stuff. He also picked up on the castle concept. So if you look at this castle in Segovia in northern Spain, there's really small windows at the lower levels so that you can defend the castle against intruders. At the middle level, there's a variety of windows that suggest kind of uses. So the ones in the middle look like that's a chapel, and the ones on the right-hand side look like that might have been a throne room or a reception room or something. Ones on the left look like maybe that's where the king had his royal residence. And then you get higher up, and the staff lives up higher, and so the accommodations get smaller and smaller. And then you go to the top of the towers, and that's the most defensible part of the whole castle. So those windows are really tiny. And when you look at the courthouse jail wing, it does exactly the same thing. Small windows at the lower level, and then a variety of windows at the functional level where the jail keeper and his family lived, and there were probably offices and things like that. And then you get higher up, the windows get smaller and smaller until you end up with the most secure jail cells at the very top. Okay, there's more things as well. I'm going to go through this fast because there's a lot of things. But we also picked up on the idea of pointed arch doorways, which is a Gothic design. And you see the lawyer's entrance has a Gothic arch combined with a tower. If you look at these three churches on the same, or two churches and a palace use Gothic arches in Spain, they also have towers next to them, right next to them. And Mosier just simply played with it a little bit, and he combined those two, and he used plaster as well instead of stone. But he picked up on that idea. So if you go to the next slide, he also picked up on a flat arch design. So the jail wing entrance has a flat arch. So do these two buildings. One is a residence and the other is a palace in Spain, and they do the same thing. But then they have a kind of a medallion up above, which probably for the two houses signify the owner of the house or the family for the house. Then there's a medallion up above the arch on the courthouse as well. But then there's this little rib that goes around it that looks like a frame. Well, it's a frame that frames the iconic what am I trying to say? The medallion that's up above there, but also it's a rain gutter. And so when rain hits that, because you have a flat arch, if the rain came straight down the wall, it would go right into the doorway, and people would have to walk through the rain to get in and out. But that creates a gutter that the stone rib makes the rain go around the outside. So then he also picked up on corner arches. And the Hall of Records originally had a corner arch, and I think that Mosier probably liked that design. And so he found some examples in Spain that do the same thing. The Parador is a fancy hotel now, but was probably a fancy residence at one point. But the Hall of Records entrance does the same thing. Then finally, there's one last thing. He had to have a turreted keep because this was a castle. And so you can see how castles have turrets at the very top. And so does the jail wing tower. It has a turret at the very top. And even though that's decorative, he really picked up on the image of all that. Okay, well, this is the end. So Mosier III used all of his imagination and all of his talent to achieve a rich variety of details and surprise for the courthouse. And together with what J. Wilmer Hershey did to come up with the original concept, and William Mosier III to develop that concept into an actual physical design, they succeeded in expressing a unique and dramatic Andalusian design for the courthouse. And the courthouse became and still is the symbol and the inspiration for rebuilding downtown Santa Barbara after the earthquake, and it's a vision that still continues today. So if you look at those different slides, go back one for a second, you can see the one in the lower center was State Street. I'm not sure when that was done. It might have been just before the courthouse when the city leaders were already trying to convert State Street to the new vision, or it could have been just after as part of after the earthquake. But that's what it looked like in the early 20th century. And then the one on the lower right is the 1930s, and that's the Arlington Theater. And they purposely put in a pedestrian street between State Street and the entrance to the theater to create a pedestrian atmosphere there. That became an important building in town, not only for its architecture, but for its arrangement. And then right behind, if you look to the left side, bottom left, that's the Arlington Theater. But behind it, this is the Santa Barbara Marketplace, which is a new building. It's only 10 years old or less. And it picked up on that same style. And when you look at the upper right, that is all the area that used to be warehouses in downtown Santa Barbara by the beach, and now are being converted to super high-end motels or hotels and apartments and things like that. And they're still being held to that same style, and they all understand how valuable the style is, and that's now the Santa Barbara image, and anything that looks like that is going to be valuable because Santa Barbara has established that image. So it took all these events and all these people all interacting and influencing each other, all these city leaders that go all the way back to the early 1900s to make this particular vision happen. And one more slide. So we've inherited a very special building, and it is up to us to be good stewards, which I think we all are, and shepherd the courthouse safely into the future. So so I hope you could actually hear me. This is a little awkward for me to use, but I hope it all worked. And
This is a wonderful presentation. We have to clear the room by noon, so we have like 5 or 6 minutes. Could you answer a question or two? Does Lord? Lord, Look, oh, wait. Sorry.
What part did Mr. Preisker, who I think at one point was the chairman of the board, have in the getting the courthouse built?
Well, I think in terms of the design, they were really concerned. They understood and really knew how a Victorian courthouse worked, and he probably was one of the ones that was reluctant to adopt the new idea of Andalusian style design until he saw Jay Wilmer's plan and how functional it was. And once it became functional, I think he really supported it. And the only other thing that he was concerned about uh, was really, can I get all the facilities that I want with, and having the design become very flexible so that they could add it really easy was something that he then supported, even though I think originally he was reluctant. Um, uh, and then he was able to buy into the whole idea. And then, of course, when they started saving money and they used the courthouse lawn instead of a building for an auditorium, he was really happy with and on top of that, they discovered that the Andalusian style was a lot cheaper than building an elaborate Baroque style building or even a stone Victorian style building. So he liked the fact that eventually it worked for him in both efficiency and in cost effectiveness, even though it was still the most expensive building ever built in Santa Barbara at the time. Yeah. Who else?
The asymmetrical roof line above the main arch is quite different than the one that in Spain. That seemed to be more symmetrical. And we have other features too that are just so asymmetrical throughout the building, yet that wasn't necessarily from the models that you showed in Spain.
Well, that's true. That's true. I think that there were a lot of influences that occurred. And it's a really good question because there was a time when people purposely looked at the idea of distorting something. And so and I can't remember exactly when that was. I didn't look it up. But I know that there was a time when people would play with those things. And they would take the principle and then they say, okay, well, we can't copy that. So they would play and modify it with it so that it could become their design. And William Mosier did that a lot. And I think that was also encouraged by some of the things that led into modernism, where they were giving up historic design, where you had to be really accurate in your details, to trying something new and creative. And he was kind of a bridge for that. And so that's what happened. And I think that's one of the really great things. Well, that could be, and I haven't seen very much of his ideas, and that could be that it was that he promoted that idea. But I think that William Mosier was willing to run with Hershey's ideas, and then he had his own ideas on how to create all the creativity and pick up and all the informality of Andalusian style design, so they didn't have to be precise like they were before. What else? Marie.
Was the fountain part of the original design? The Spirit of the Ocean fountain in front of the building?
I don't know. I have not studied that, so I'm not sure. I know I really don't know the answer to that. My guess is that came along later because that was, all of the decorations and all of those things were added later in the design. I think that they were, I don't know that they were built later, but I think that became part of the advanced part of the design. And for me, what I thought was really interesting was what William Mosier Jr. did for the big building and the big concept. But all those were decorations, and so I unfortunately I don't know much about it. So good question though.
Thank you. Before we do another round of applause, Mary Nisbet and Alan, thank you for today. And we're going to be able to put this presentation on our website or send a link to people. So that'll be good. We'll have all of that. And now thank you again to David DeSelm. Class dismissed. Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Oh.
I was in